We are going to get started this morning in Milwaukee with day 2 of the Republican National Convention.
The convention began yesterday as scheduled, less than 48 hours after the assassination attempt against former President Trump. He made an unscheduled appearance on the convention floor last night to the roars of an approving crowd. He did not speak, but you could see his injured right ear covered by a bandage. We're also learning more details this morning about Saturday's shooting in Pennsylvania. A federal law enforcement official tells NBC News local police officers notified the former president's Secret Service detail. They were looking for a suspicious person in the area before the shooting.
Earlier in the day, Mr. Trump named Ohio Senator J.D. Vance to be his running mate. Vance was once a vocal critic of the former president, but has since become a close and outspoken ally. Mr. Trump officially became the Republican nominee during the roll call of the states when Florida's delegates put him over the top.
On behalf of our entire family, and on behalf of the 125 delegates in the unbelievable state of Florida, we hereby nominate every single one of them for the greatest president that's ever lived, and that's Donald J. Trump, hereby declaring him the Republican nominee for President of the United States of America.
We have full coverage ahead this morning, including the latest on the investigation into the assassination attempt of the former president. But let's begin this morning with NBC's Garrett Haake, who joins us from the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Garrett, good morning. So now we officially have a Republican ticket for the general election. We'll see if there's real signs and not those handmade ones we saw yesterday. But walk us through this eventful first day of the convention and how Senator Vance, a one-time Trump critic, came to be his running mate.
Hey, Joe. Good morning. Look, Senator Vance was kind of always the front runner for this job. He has grown so close to Donald Trump and especially to Donald Trump's eldest son. He's really kind of a pure MAGA conservative in the Senate now. But the effort was such to keep this secret that even Vance only found out he was the pick about 20 minutes before Donald Trump announced it. That led to the scene you're describing where attendees here were having to write his name in on Trump signs, the campaign not even printing out the merch to have them ready for the announcement yesterday. This process that ended with J.D. Vance becoming the nominee really did start several years ago when Vance, who was at the kind of beginning of his political career, a very vocal Trump critic, coming around on Trump, turning into a Trump acolyte, one of his loudest voices sort of for the MAGA wing of the party in the Senate. This long process by which Vance has said he was convinced by Donald Trump's record to get on his side. It'll be that record that he's going to be asked to go out and defend across the country now, but especially across those Rust Belt states where the Ohio senator is expected to be a major player for the Trump campaign going forward.
Garrett, we saw the former president last night, as we said, sort of a surprise, the first time we've seen him since that assassination attempt. But we do expect to hear from him when he accepts his party's nomination in a speech as the convention concludes on Thursday. And we understand that this is not going to be the speech that he had initially planned. Following what happened on Saturday, he's changed it. What can you tell us about what we can expect?
Yeah, that's right. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see Donald Trump again these next couple of days. In 2016, remember, he was a presence in some capacity at every night of his convention. But appearing last night to the roars from the crowd, the first time we were seeing his bandaged ear after that assassination attempt on Saturday. The former president has told reporters that he's spoken to that the assassination attempt really did change his thinking on this moment in our politics, and his speech on Thursday night in particular. He said he threw out a tougher draft of it, and he's starting over, trying to reach some kind of national unity. His son Eric was on our air last night and explained what he knows about what his father will say on Thursday. Listen to this.
His speech is beautiful. It's inspirational. It's forward-looking for this country. It's incredibly positive. It's exactly what we need right now. That's exactly what this country needs. It's the right tone. And frankly, I think it's a lot of what you're seeing out here. I mean, people are dancing. They're holding the American flag. The patriotism in this room is unbelievable. I mean, these people in here, they love America. They bleed red, white, and blue. And we need a lot more of that in this country.
Now, in his 10 years or so on the public stage as a political figure, we've not typically seen that kind of more optimistic, forward-looking rhetoric from Donald Trump. So it'll be a very interesting moment to watch on Thursday night, what that means to him and whether he can translate that vision to the country going forward.
Garrett, real quickly, what can we expect on day 2? What's the theme?
The theme tonight is Make America Safe Again, Make America Strong Again. Expect to hear about immigration and crime. The one speech I'm really looking at, Joe, Nikki Haley, Donald Trump's only meaningful primary opponent, is expected to speak tonight. Will she do a Ted Cruz-style heel turn like we saw in 2016, or will she give a more full-throated endorsement of the man who defeated her in the primary? You have to tune in.
All right, Garrett Hake in Milwaukee. Garrett, thank you. We'll have much more from the Republican National Convention throughout the day here on NBC News Now. Our extensive live coverage of Day 2 gets underway at 4 p.m. Eastern. We'll also have primetime coverage tonight on NBC.
Let's now take a look at the investigation into the assassination attempt on former President Trump. We have NBC News law enforcement and intelligence correspondent Tom Winter with us this morning. Tom, thank you for being here. So let's start with this. The look into the motive. We understand the FBI has been investigating the shooter's phone, which often can provide clues, right? What do we know so far? How is that going as we do this deep dive on him?
I mean, think about it, Savannah. Your phone is your life, and the phone doesn't lie forensically. So you either search for something or you didn't. You either have an app or you don't. You messaged or you didn't. And so I think what the FBI was hoping for was that by getting into the phone and doing an analysis of the contents of that phone, that they would be able to glean some clues, not just on the how. They're definitely getting that, what receipts he had in his pocket, when the ammo was purchased, all those type of details are starting to come into focus, but the why. And according to our reporting, at least from 2 senior U.S. law enforcement officials, a preliminary review of that phone has not helped them get any closer to a potential motive. That's going to make it tricky going forward.
The other aspect to all this is how law enforcement responded. We're learning more. We understand people headed to the event noticed the gunman behaving strangely. Police tried to approach him before he opened fire. Police also warned the Secret Service they were looking for a suspicious person at the rally. What else can you tell us about what we're learning about the moments leading up to the shoot?
So apparently, Joe, this all goes down to the magnetometer. And so where people are trying to get into the event, they notice this person, they notice them acting a little bit strangely, they tell local police. Local police radios it in. They even take a picture, according to our station in Pittsburgh. They take a photograph of this person. They get it to the command post, and then they try to find the person because they lose him at some point. To be clear, the idea of a suspicious person at any political rally, that happens actually fairly often. But what did they notice on this specific person? What was done to find them? And then once you hear, well, we're looking for a suspicious person, and then you see somebody that we're looking at on the video right there that's on top of the roof, what action was taken there? All sorts of questions. It's radio traffic, some of which is encrypted. It's the Secret Service's radio traffic. Some of it is local radio traffic. All those type of things need to be poured over in the coming couple of days.
So we understand now that the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees the Secret Service, is conducting a review. Tell us where we're at about the investigation into how this was responded to and how it happened in the first place.
Right. So the Secret Service and the DHS Secretary Mayorkas have promised that there will be an independent review into it. I mean, look, when you think about the season, the political season that we're going into, it's really just kicking off. This is not exactly like it's the last week of the campaign. And these candidates love to do these rallies. Certainly Trump loves to do these type of outdoor rallies. We've seen him do it the entire time he's ever campaigned. So there are some serious questions that need to be answered now. There's always been, or at least since 2016, serious questions about resources for the Secret Service. Do they have enough agents? Do they have the resources to go out there and do it? And then what is going to be the interaction with local law enforcement from here on out? A lot of these states, this is Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania State Police is not at all unused to candidate events, so this is not a new thing for them to deal with. And they're a competent law enforcement agency, but what was done at even the more hyper-local level with the local police department, again, all questions that need answers. Secret Service, big organization, they're charged with protecting our top political leaders. So, yeah, I think that's why we're going to get a serious, or hopefully a serious investigation to determine what happened.
Tom Winter, a lot to come here. I'm sure we'll be talking more. Thanks for your reporting.
Got it. Another major headline. One of the criminal cases against former President Trump was dismissed yesterday by a federal judge. That stunning decision in the classified documents case out of Florida is the latest major legal victory for Trump. NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett has more on the decision and reaction.
It was already indefinitely on hold. A federal judge in Florida handing Donald Trump a sweeping, unexpected legal windfall, dismissing the charges he'd faced for hoarding classified documents at his Mar-a-Lago estate after leaving the White House and then allegedly obstructing the government's efforts to get them back.
Violations of those laws put our country at risk.
Judge Eileen Cannon finding the appointment of that top prosecutor, special counsel Jack Smith, improper, Cannon, a Trump appointee, concluding in a 93-page decision that Smith's appointment by Attorney General Merrick Garland violated the Constitution, as Smith wasn't nominated by the president or confirmed by the Senate. That reasoning, a dramatic departure from every other court that's looked at the issue. The former president pleaded not guilty to the charges last summer. Mr. Trump described as very happy with the court victory, according to a source who spoke with him, as he called for the dismissal of his 3 other pending cases. Lester asking President Biden to weigh in on the ruling.
Judge Cannon dismissed the documents case, as you may have heard, in Mar-a-Lago. Can I first get your reaction to that?
I'm not surprised.
Our thanks to Laura Jarrett for that report. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us now for more on this. So the Justice Department, the special counsel, they do plan to appeal this. We know this is not going to go to trial before the election, but what is this appeals process going to look like potentially?
Yeah, unlike President Biden, I was surprised. If anyone thought this case was going to be dismissed, they probably expected it would be related to the immunity decision by the Supreme Court not too long ago. But this was certainly a surprise, and the timing was really interesting. Doesn't look good for Judge Cannon because 90-plus pages means that this wasn't just hammered out over the weekend. This was at least in some kind of draft form for some time. So one has to wonder about the timing of the release of this opinion. Now, timing going forward, that's always the second or third question, and the answer is always it depends. It depends on the appeals court. It depends how much of a priority they place on this. And then, of course, the next question after that is if the appeals court doesn't overturn it, does it end up at the Supreme Court? Does it end up at the Supreme Court no matter what? And is Justice Thomas's signal that he sent in his concurring opinion anything we should read into?
Let's explain that. When the presidential immunity decision was made, Justice Clarence Thomas wrote a concurring opinion that addressed this very specific issue, which some found odd, but that's raised questions about whether the Supreme Court might want to take this up, right?
Odd because it was gratuitous. It wasn't really necessary. And also, Justice Thomas was alone in that concurring opinion. And it really raised this issue of the appointments clause, which Judge Cannon quoted liberally. She also quoted not then Justice Amy Coney Barrett, but some of her academic writings as well, in a way that almost I would as an advocate. I try to do this all the time. If I'm writing a motion before a judge, I look for anything that the judge has said, basically to kiss up to the judge and say, look what you wrote, Judge. Aren't you so smart? Please rule in my favor. And it really struck me that that, in a way, was what Judge Cannon was trying to do. I said justice. Maybe I'm slipping. Maybe I'm previewing something if Donald Trump's ever elected. This is something that I think is really, really interesting, the way she writes, as if she's insulating, planning for the future, knowing that this will be appealed and bolstering her argument in 90-plus pages. There's an uphill battle here because for decades now, since the 70s, the country has interpreted the Supreme Court decision in Nixon to say that you can appoint under these regulations a special counsel like Smith.
Let's talk more about the specificity of exactly what she said. Specifically, one thing, Judge Aileen Cannon ruled that special counsel Jack Smith's funding was also unconstitutional. Explain that to us. Explain more about this appointments clause.
So that's the appointments clause is the idea that Jack Smith was not properly appointed because he's an officer that needs to be confirmed by the Senate. The appropriations clause argument is a different argument, one that the court didn't reach. And that's really probably a strategic decision by not reaching it here. But it's a strange thing to signal. This is how I would rule, but it's not the grounds for dismissal. She's saying, essentially, if it comes back, I get another swing at this, and then I would dismiss it on appropriations clause. And then, of course, we have no idea if the immunity decision would affect yet a third opportunity to dismiss this case. Judge Cannon has sent a signal, in my view, and that signal is that this case, one way or another, is not going forward.
Real quick, you mentioned this already, but it seems as if this decision goes against the precedent we've seen for decades when it comes to these issues with special prosecutors, right?
Yes, since the Nixon era, 1974. And look, the special counsel and the independent counsel statute before that and amidst that has had a checkered history. But this argument's been around for some time. It's really interesting because the language in the statute speaks of being able to appoint a retained special counsel. And I'm really paraphrasing here, and the words are important. But the way Judge Cannon interpreted that was that it would be an already appointed special counsel. The statute doesn't give the Attorney General the power to appoint a new special counsel. Really interesting interpretation of the language.
All right, Danny Savalos, thank you so much.
As always. Well, President Biden sat down with nightly news anchor Lester Holt for his first interview since Saturday's assassination attempt on former President Trump. In this NBC News exclusive, Biden discusses how to move forward in the wake of this weekend's violence and also address those concerns about his age. Take a look.
Mr. President, thank you for sitting down with us. There's a lot to talk about. I'd like to start with the horrible events of last weekend. It has shocked a lot of Americans. A political rally, your opponent, Donald Trump, shot in the middle of greeting his supporters. You spoke to Mr. Trump afterward. Can you give me a sense of that conversation?
Very cordial. I told him how concerned I was and wanted to make sure I knew how he was actually doing. He sounded good. He said he was fine. And he thanked me for calling him. I told him he was literally in the prayers of Jill and me. And I hope his whole family was weathering this.
Well, let's talk about the conversation this has started. And it's really about language, what we say out loud and the consequences of those. You called your opponent an existential threat. On a call a week ago, you said it's time to put Trump in the bullseye. There's some dispute about the context, but I think you appreciate that.
I didn't say crosshairs. I was talking about focus on. Look, the truth of the matter was, what I guess I was talking about at the time was, there was very little focus on Trump's agenda.
Yeah, the term was bullseye.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing. Focus on his policies. Focus on the number of lies he told in the debate. Focus. I mean, there's a whole range of things that, look, I'm not the guy that said, I want to be a dictator on day one. I'm not the guy that refused to accept the outcome of the election. I'm not the guy who said that wouldn't accept the outcome of this election automatically. You can't only love your country when you win.
Mr. President, you've been in politics a very long time, so let's speak frankly. We're all adults here. Has this shooting changed the trajectory of this race?
I don't know, and you don't know either.
I don't know, but have you something you've given thought to?
No, I've thought less about the trajectory of the case than two things. One, what his health is, that was secure, number one. And number two, what happens from here on in terms of the kind of coverage that the president and vice president and former president and new vice president get in terms of, look, I've never seen a circumstance where you ride through certain rural areas of the country and people have signs there, big Trump signs with middle signs saying F Biden, and a little kid standing there putting up his middle finger. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that is just inflammatory and a kind of viciousness. It's a very different thing than to say, look, I really disagree with the way he takes care of taxes, the way he wants a $5 trillion tax cut for people who are making a lot of money next time around. Doesn't focus on working class people.
And I asked him about his struggle in the debate and the calls from some Democrats for him to step aside. Do you feel like you've weathered the storm on this issue of whether you should be on the ticket or not?
Look, 14 million people voted for me to be the nominee in the Democratic Party, okay? I listened to them.
In your last TV interview, you were asked if you had watched the debate. Your answer was, I don't think so, no. Have you since seen it?
I've seen pieces of it. I've not watched the whole debate.
The president also responding to news of Donald Trump's new vice presidential pick. I want to ask you about, just shortly before you and I sat down, former President Trump named his vice presidential pick, J.D. Vance. What does that tell you, his qualities? What does that tell you about former President Trump's values in terms of who he will surround himself with in a next administration should he win?
Well, it's not unusual. He's going to surround himself with people who agree completely with him. Have a voting record, like support him. Even though if you go back and listen to the things that J.D. Vance said about Trump.
Our thanks to Lester Holt for bringing us that interview with the president. Well, for more on this, let's bring in NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba. Monica, good morning. So we just heard some of the president's conversation there, of course. What made him decide specifically to keep that interview as planned, given everything that has unfolded since Saturday and given that his other plans had changed, had been canceled? And then tell us anything else about his message.
Yeah, because this interview had been announced last week, long before that assassination attempt on former President Trump's life. But President Biden, with his team, they huddled, they discussed it, and they said, we want to keep this interview because we want to echo the message that the president aimed to deliver in his Oval Office address the night before, which was one of national unity and trying to really call on Americans to reduce the heat on an already heightened political environment. Here's a little bit more about that in an exchange with Lester Holt.
What can you and what will you do, at least things you can control, to lower down the temperature, the rhetoric out there?
Continue to talk about the things that matter to the American public. It matters whether or not you accept the outcome of elections. It matters whether or not you, for example, talk about how you're going to deal with the border instead of talking about people as being vermin. And I mean, those things matter. That's the kind of language that is inflammatory.
So the president is really going to try to be drawing some more policy contrast when he hits the trail again in Nevada later today, guys.
So, Monica, we know there was a growing chorus of Democrats calling for President Biden to step aside as the Democratic nominee before the assassination attempt here this last weekend. Now that Mr. Trump has announced his VP running mate, the classified documents case has been dismissed. Do we think we're going to see Democrats re-rally behind him, or are those conversations still going on behind the scenes?
Privately, I think Democrats are still anxious about this, and they are discussing whether some who maybe were going to come out in the last couple of days before the events of the weekend and say that they think the president should step aside and shouldn't be the nominee, they're trying to figure out whether they're still going to do that publicly. Are they going to do that as a group? Are they going to wait? Or is this conversation kind of going to recede into the background as it has in these last couple of days? But President Biden says he is completely firm in his decision, that he's really not reconsidering this, that he fully plans to go full steam ahead. As you see, again, he's campaigning. He's going to be lining up all these other events. But here's a little bit more about what he had to say about his future and what he's thinking about.
Look, I've been doing this a long time. The idea that I'm the old guy, I am. I'm old. But I'm only 3 years older than Trump, number one. And number two, my mental acuity has been pretty damn good. I've gotten more done than any president has in a long, long time, in 3.5 years. So I'm willing to be judged on that.
And of course, we're talking about the Republican National Convention a lot this week, but the Rules Committee for the Democratic National Convention, where he will be formally nominated, some of those key decisions about how that could happen actually in anticipation of the August 19th gathering, that's going to take place at the end of this week. So we may know more about that process really soon.
All right, Monica Alba, thank you very much.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.